beer, it's good for you.
Hello and welcome to the video. I was very privileged to be able to test this new yeast before it went publicly to market, and ever since I've been testing it with various different recipes and brewing methods. I then organised some taste testing and further tweaking before brewing what was found to be the master recipe in taste tests. It's fair to say that I do quite a lot of this, but I'm sharing this one in particular because I am extremely proud and happy with the end result, as have others been too. Within this video I'll be sharing lots of information, including this final recipe and method that pairs so very nicely with this yeast, and simply allows all of the intended flavours to sing in harmony like a well-rehearsed symphony. This will finish with me showing you the end result and what you can expect from the end beer. So let's get started. Verdant IPA yeast to my mind is a super special yeast due to its tropical fruity flavours, big apricot and hints of peach. It is also a fast yeast when it comes to fermentation, meaning that beers can be turned around quickly. This certainly suits a lot of people too. In designing a recipe where this yeast will be fully utilised, it is these flavours that need to be fully considered in terms of how well they will pair with the accompanying flavours from our malt and hops. I released a video not so long ago that shared lots of insider information about this new yeast, so if you have not seen this one already then you may consider watching it after this one for a full complement of information. Right, let's get the brew on and I will run through the recipe explaining the effects of each component. As usual I'm sharing this recipe in full written form in this video's description and also via a net link to the recipe on Brewfather. Brewfather can be used totally free of charge, so as such nobody is excluded, which is one of the many reasons I recommend it. I use the 35 litre Brewzilla for this brew, but via Brewfather it can easily be adapted to any other brewing system or method, as well as being easy to resize to whichever volume you would like to brew. See my Brewfather videos for more information. Shown on the left hand side of the screen now are this recipe's vital statistics along with the grain bill. This recipe expects a colour of 10 EBC, which is just over 5 SRM. You can see by the chart on screen now where this falls in terms of colour. This recipe has an ABV of 6%, which in my testing was the sweet spot. Certainly you could go higher or lower if you wish, just bear in mind that this is the level for the reason of taste. The grain bill here has a classic mix, but these percentage ratios have been tweaked to accommodate the flavours of the hops and yeast. We have Otter at 60%, which is in part our canvas, but this malt also brings along some nutty and biscuit-like flavours, which are very nice. You do not necessarily need to use Otter here. There are other fine pale malts of good quality that will also work, like Golden Promise for example. Next we have Vienna at 17%. This will give some extra malty and grainy flavours. Vienna is particularly suited to hobby styles because it adds in its contribution to flavour without risking it competing with our hops. In case of this recipe, the same was true in terms of the flavours from our yeast also. There will be simply no competition, and that is exactly why I designed it in this way. At 15% we have our friends Flaked Oats. These will add some creaminess and texture to the end result, but because these oats are flaked they are suitable for an infusion single mash, and no cereal mash is needed. Naturally these will also add some haze to the end clarity, but I would think all will be forgiven by the wildest clarity fan once they taste the difference. Then at 5% we have crystal malt, and the idea here is that this is going to tweak the colour, and Carapils at 3% for some extra caramel sweet notes in the deep background of this flavour, along with head retention and a little extra mouthfeel. Onto the boil now, and as you would expect from the grain involved here, there was a fair amount of protein that had accumulated on the run up to the boil. I prefer to stir this back in to keep its flavour, but some will remove it, and in return they will be able to obtain clarity easier. Make your own choices here of course, but with the amount of hops involved here it really is destined to be a hazy one. Shown on the right hand side of the screen now are details of the hops involved and the timings. I actually did a 60-minute boil for this particular brew, but if you wanted some extra texture then you could reduce this to 30 minutes without changing anything, as all of the hops are added late. Naturally this is something to decide before you start the brew, as it will affect your water volumes. You will note that there are two hot side hop additions, the first being at 10 minutes, which I added in the usual way straight into the boil, but when it came to the hopstand I went a different path. This is the Hop Missile, a product that I reviewed on this channel not so long ago. and frankly it is perfect for this brew. The hop missile, like the hop rocket before it, can operate as a hop back. I recirculated the wort through the hop missile, which contained all of my late hop additions during the hop stand. I just love the effect this brings to a hoppy beer with hop flavours singing bright and clean. As you have no doubt have noticed, the flow rate here is also very good. I used hop pellets within a hop sock with rice holes and it works very nicely. Usually I would do something else during the hop stand, but the smell was so good I stuck around and gave my nose a hop treat. Naturally, this recipe still works very nicely without the use of this extra equipment, so if you do not have anything to use, then do not let this deter you from brewing this recipe. Seeing as it would be pretty insane to use a yeast like this under pressure fermentation, I used the Grainfather conical fermenter, and during the cooling phase continued the wort flow through the hop missile in the hope that there was something left to pick up hop flavour and aroma wise at these lower temperatures. I find that this usually adds in something extra and furthers the complexity of the hop flavours. Once I had some wort in the fermenter, I pitched the Verdant yeast and aimed my cold wort directly at it to speed up the process. The temperature was at 19 degrees Celsius or 66 degrees Fahrenheit, which is the first step of my chosen fermentation profile for this yeast. I would recommend starting at this temperature and holding it for the first 5 days, and then raise the temperature at 1 degree Celsius per day until you reach 22 degrees Celsius or between 71 to 72 degrees Fahrenheit. In my testing, this is where the yeast was most happy, and the final ramp up will drive off DMS and should provide full attenuation as long as your yeast health has not been compromised in some way. When at this current stage and using this yeast from the sachet, there is actually no need to aerate. This is true of Lallemand and Fermentis yeast due to the formulations. If you do aerate, then certainly this may reduce lag time, but some in-industry studies have shown that this can reduce yeast health and impact attenuation, or otherwise known as the yeast's ability to eat all of the fermentables available, meaning a higher than expected final gravity. I used an ice spindle to monitor this yeast and had the Wi-Fi relay attached, as reviewed on this channel recently. The readings you see here is after fermentation has started, and I found that the first 24 hours were fairly calm, but then after that things certainly stepped up and a final gravity of 1.009 was reached within 5 days, which remained constant for some days after. This was a little higher than the estimate predicted in Brewfather, but there are so many variables involved here that I do not expect anything more. The other device shown here is the Inkbird TH1 Plus, which shows ambient temperature on top and humidity at the bottom. This was also reviewed on my channel recently and has proved very useful for making sure that my attached glycol chiller will be able to handle the task. If this room temperature goes too high, then I would need to move the fermentation into another cooler area. Here is the finished beer being served from the keg a few weeks later. I particularly like the colour on this one, but of course a beer is made for tasting, so let's get to that now. Like all beers, the aroma contributes to the taste due to the fact that our mouths and noses are linked. The aroma on this one is quite simply an explosion of hop flavours that are full of citrus, tropical fruit, pine, along with some floral and a little spice. At the end you may also pick up some small sweet notes in the background too. If you like big aroma, then you are really going to appreciate this one. In terms of flavour, this is for sure hop dominated. Like with the aroma, you have lots of citrus and various tropical fruit flavours along with some berry and stone fruit. The apricot is for sure there, but it is balanced with the rest of the fruit. There is a nice bite of bitterness at first that ends smooth and sometimes a little sweet, but this varies down the glass. When the majority of people try this for the first time, they comment about how clean and strong the hop flavours are, and then further down the glass mention complexity and a little sweetness at points. There is certainly some malty backbone holding this together, but you will not taste it on every sip. Here are some further notes that I have made, which are mostly observations. I have found that people tend to drink a few of these pretty fast, and then feel it hit them. This is a beer that I suggest you take a little slower and swill around your mouth and take your time to enjoy all the flavours present. There is much to be discovered here, and depending on what you have eaten or drunk before it, that can actually provide a more varied experience than most other beers. If you like your beers hoppy, then this will certainly not disappoint. But I have also found that those that are not even hopheads seem to enjoy this one too, due to how clean and refreshing it is. I have used a similar recipe and variations with other types of yeast, and none have turned out as well in my opinion compared to using Verdant. This was also found to be the general consensus that I got from my taster friends too. I cannot guarantee that any beer will fit all tastes, but I have already been asked to brew a large batch of this for Christmas by more than just a few people, and I'm going to do just that as part of my festive season assortment. This YouTube channel has its own Facebook groups, links are shown on screen now. It is a busy group and the membership is mixed from people that are about to brew for the very first time, through to brewing industry professionals of different roles. The atmosphere is very friendly and helpful. There is a great team of moderators who ensure that things stay on track. This now brings this video to a close. If you have any questions then please let me know via YouTube or Facebook. I do hope that you found this video to be useful, interesting and enjoyable. If appropriate then please like this video on YouTube, and if you've not done so already then please subscribe. I regularly post new content. Happy brewing!